Hi everyone, it's Diana again. In this lesson we're going to look at brushes. I've started with some shapes on the screen just to show you how the brushes will apply to these lines and how we can also apply brushes to text. On the right hand side of the interface we have a series of icons that represent panels that will pop out. And one of those is our brushes panel. I've previously loaded it up with some various brushes that I've downloaded or that have shipped with Illustrator. And I'm going to show you the different types of brushes that we have and how they look when they're applied to different shapes, and then we're going to have a look at how to actually create these brushes. So if we go up to the top right hand little downward facing arrow in the brushes panel, we have what's called the new brush panel that allows us to create new brushes, and there are 5 different types of brushes that we can create. First we've got the calligraphic brush, then we've got the scatter brush, then the art brush, the bristle brush, and the pattern brush. They all do different things, and the best way to explain them is to show you. So firstly we'll have a look at the calligraphic brush. Now if I click OK to create a calligraphic brush, it'll bring up this options box, and don't be frightened with these variations in here. All they're allowing you to do is to customize the brush itself. The first thing you can do is name your brush, so I'll name mine Test, and next we can use this little box on the left side here to actually customize the shape of this calligraphic brush by rotating and squeezing the actual ellipse. To the right hand side of your angle, your roundness and your size, we can change these options to fixed or random. Now if I had originally created a stroke with my stylus on the tablet, I would have some more options in here for pressure, tilt, bearing, rotation and stylus wheel. So the options we have, just creating a calligraphic brush off the bat, I just fixed and random. So I can also use these sliders here to change the angle and the roundness, and as you can see on the right here it's showing us a preview of what will happen. Now if I choose random, it will show me some variation, and I choose to change the percentage of the angle or the roundness and size for variation. It will give me a preview at the top here for what the variation might look like. If I increase the size you can see that a lot better. So if I choose OK to that and then I select my square and choose the test that I've created, we can see how that calligraphic brush applies to these different shapes. Now if that doesn't look like what you're anticipating, just double click on it. It'll bring up the options again. Make sure your preview box is checked, and then you can make some adjustments and it will apply to the objects that you've applied that brush to. I'll take a lot of the roundness off so it becomes more of a wedge type shape, increase the size a little bit, and then it's asking me that brush is in use and some strokes may have overridden its options. Do you want to apply the changes to that existing brush stroke? I'm going to choose leave strokes, and then I can go back to my test and apply that new variation to my stroke. So I'm going to select these again and go back to my basic stroke, which is the one with basic next to it. Now you can view these brushes by list view or by thumbnail, and you'll notice that on the right hand side here you've got icons that relate to each type of brush. Now the next one we'll have a look at is up to new brush, scatter brush. Now we can't create a scatter brush, it's grayed out at the moment unless we've got something selected. So the idea with some of these brushes, for instance the art brush and the scatter brush, is to create a shape first from which the brush is built. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and Option to constrain and duplicate this square, and I'm going to scale it down a little bit, and I'll maybe make a few more of them overlapping one another, and then I'm going to select them together and go back up to new brush and choose scatter brush. I like to choose random just because it's nice to see what will happen, and you need to choose a percentage for your random slider, and I'm just going to call this test 2. If you had a particular color you could choose tints and shades or hue shift, and maybe I will just leave that as it is for now. And then when I use this brush with the scatter option selected, it's going to scatter these brushes along the line. So if I apply it to the spiral, for instance, you can see that it has applied a random variation of that scatter brush along some of the points in this path. And I expect that each time, if I undo it and apply it again, it will give me another random variation because I had my random set pretty high. So that gives you an idea of the scatter brush. You can create any shapes, colors, tints, tones, all sorts of things and apply that same method. The next one we can have a look at is our art brush, and again we need to start with something to apply it. Now, the art brush is something that we often use to generate custom hair strokes. So I'll just make this black, I'll take the stroke off it, and I will add a couple of extra points to either side of this and stretch them out, and then maybe I will round off one end. So this is a shape I'm going to use to create an art brush. So new brush, art brush. The brush scale options will stretch to fit the stroke length, which gives you some really nice variation in these brushes. I'm just going to leave all of these other options as they are. When I choose this option with my brush tool, I can start brushing with this actual brush, art brush that we've created, or I can apply that brush to different paths that I've already pre-created. So these are different paths that I have generated. Some of them are shapes, some of them are pencil drawn paths, and I can apply that brush to them, and you can have a look at the variation that you can get. Now, I have some other art brushes in here that I've downloaded from different places. So this one, for instance, hand-drawn looking brush. So someone may have used a charcoal pencil and just hand-drawn a line and scanned it in, turned it into a vector shape, and created a brush from it. So that's exactly how you would do it to create your own custom brushes in Illustrator. For those of you that love drawing and like that real freehand looking style. The next one we're going to have a look at is our bristle brush. Now, bristle brushes are fairly new to Illustrator, and we can find the series of bristle brushes that are pre-shipped with Illustrator from our window menu. If we go down to brush libraries, bristle brush library, now that library will pop out on the screen on its own and show us some variation in the types of brushes that have shipped with Illustrator. One of the good ways of working with the bristle brush is to actually paint inside an object so that the actual perimeter of the object masks the final shape that you create from your brushes. You can actually choose some different colors from your swatches palette to create bristle brushes with, and I might choose a series of sort of green colors for this. So I'm going to choose my paintbrush tool, maybe my number 6 mop brush, and increase my point weight to 3 points and start brushing on the screen. So you can see that we have a level of transparency that builds up over the top of itself the more you keep brushing. But in fact, all of these individual brush looking strokes are only vector lines. If I go up to view and outline, you can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tiny little random looking shapes that I've drawn on the screen, and I can move those around in preview mode and put them in different places as need be, and put them in different places the moment I've drawn over the top of that square. But what I want to do is draw inside of the square and use the perimeter of the square to mask the actual painting. So this time I'm going to choose the option of draw inside, and you'll notice it brings up these little perforated looking lines on the outside of the shape. I can click off that shape now, go back to my brush tool, choose the color that I want to paint with. I'll go back to that green, increase the stroke weight, maybe I'll stick with this mop, and then when I paint, you can see that it paints inside of that shape, which is really handy if you've pre-drawn a shape of something, whether it be an apple or a leaf. Whatever you've drawn, you can isolate it and draw with your bristle brush inside it. Now I can change colors at this stage and keep painting, and they will appear to overlap one another and build up in transparency. I can choose white and build up over the top. You can use these with extra levels of transparency and blend modes as well, which I might talk to you about some other time. So once you've achieved something that you like, this is a fairly abstract pattern, I haven't started with anything in mind, then we choose draw normal and click on the screen, and then I can come back to my direct selection tool and I can remove the outline from my square, but I can still change the shape of this. So there's quite a bit of flexibility with the bristle brush. Alright, the next brush on our list is our pattern brush. Now the pattern brush is handy for doing things like mandalas, and you can create a pattern brush out of your own pre-made shape. You might actually use one of the brushes, create a shape, and use that to create a pattern brush. And then you can apply that pattern brush to the outside of an actual shape, and you can create some really interesting looking mandala type effects. the larger the stroke, the fewer iterations of that pattern brush will fit around that shape itself. So if I make it really small, I'll get more versions of that shape that's been turned into a pattern brush, which actually started off as an art brush, and they will generate themselves around that shape.